You ever get that uneasy feeling before work, like the world just holding its breath? That was me that night, coffee in hand, sitting in the dim glow of my dashboard, wondering why this job always felt like a gamble I couldn't afford to lose. I pulled into the stop-and-go parking lot 15 minutes early for my shift, watching as a blue sedan parked crookedly across 2 spaces. The new guy. Management had told me yesterday I'd be training someone tonight. The car door opened, and out stepped a young man with messy hair and a wrinkled uniform shirt, one hand holding his phone, the other clutching a giant energy drink. As a single mother of 2, I couldn't afford to lose this job. The stop-and-go paid nearly double what other stores in Riverdale offered, enough to keep food on the table and maybe save a little each month. There was a reason for the pay, of course, but that wasn't something you explained in a job posting. The new employee walked toward me with an easy smile, sticking out his hand. "Mark Carter," he said. "You must be Samantha." "Just call me Sam," I replied, shaking his hand briefly before walking to the entrance. "Let's get inside. I'll show you around." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I unlocked the door. The night manager wouldn't arrive until much later, plenty of time to cover the basics. And by basics, I meant the rules. The very important rules that kept us alive. "So," Mark said as he followed me in, "Thomas said you've been here a while." 3 years, I answered, placing my purse in the locked drawer behind the counter, "which means I've outlasted about a dozen employees who didn't take this job seriously." Mark laughed, assuming I was joking. I wasn't. "Before we get to register training," I said, watching his face carefully, "there are store-specific rules you need to know. Rule number 1, never work alone, no matter what. If someone calls in sick, you call me or another employee before starting a solo shift." Mark nodded. "Sure, safety in numbers." "This isn't about robbery prevention," I said firmly. 2 years ago, a guy named Jason decided to cover a shift alone. The camera showed him working normally until 2001 7 a.m. Then he looked up at something off-screen and walked into the storage room. He never came out. Mark's smile faltered. "You mean he quit mid-shift?" The back door was locked from the inside. His car was still in the lot. He just vanished. Mark frowned. Weird coincidence. I could already tell he'd be difficult. Some people needed to see it for themselves, and by then, it was usually too late. I showed him the aisles, how to rotate stock, how to check expiration dates. He was sharp enough, though careless in a way that worried me. When we reached the coolers, I handed him a box of energy drinks. "So why is the pay so good?" he asked, stacking cans. "The hours," I lied, "and the special circumstances." Special circumstances? Before I could answer, a loud scratching came from the bathroom. It sounded like fingernails dragging across the inside of the door. Mark turned toward the noise. "What's that?" I caught his arm. "Rule 5. Never investigate bathroom noises between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. The scratching grew louder. "Someone might need help," he said, moving forward. "The bathroom's empty. I checked before closing." The sound shifted, soft crying now like a child. Mark's eyes widened. "That sounds like a kid." "It's not a kid," I said firmly. "It's never a kid." The crying stopped, replaced by silence thick enough to choke on. Mark stared at the door, pale. "What was that?" he whispered. "That," I said quietly, "is why we get paid so well." Mark didn't say much for the next few minutes. He kept glancing toward the bathroom door as if waiting for another sound, but the silence held steady. I'd seen that look before. The dawning realization that this job wasn't normal, that something lived in the cracks between the aisles and the hours. I poured him a cup of burnt coffee from the machine behind the counter. "Drink up," I said. "You'll need it." He took it with a shaky hand. "So that noise earlier, what was it, really?" "You'll hear things," I said. Voices, footsteps, maybe whispers from the back room. "Ignore them. No one else works the night shift but us." He nodded uncertainly. "Right. Ignore them. Good. Now, rule 2. I leaned on the counter, lowering my voice. "If the front lights flicker more than 3 times, lock the doors immediately. Doesn't matter who's outside. Don't open them again until the flickering stops." That sounds oddly specific. You'll understand soon enough. At 11:23 p.m., the first flicker came, then another. Mark froze, his cup halfway to his lips. "Don't just stand there," I hissed, moving to the door. We locked both handles and drew the security latch. Outside, the gas pumps gleamed under the yellow light, empty and still. The third flicker lasted longer. For a moment, everything plunged into darkness. When the lights snapped back on, someone stood outside, a man in a business suit, his face pressed against the glass. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. His suit was soaking wet, though it hadn't rained in weeks. "Should we let him in?" Mark whispered. "Do you see his eyes?" I asked. Mark squinted. The man's eyes were pitch black, like holes punched through his skull. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Rule 3, I said. Never make eye contact with them. Pretend they aren't there." We turned away, but I could feel the man's presence like static electricity crawling over my skin. "Is he going to leave?" Mark asked. "Eventually." "How do you know?" I gave a grim smile. The ones who don't aren't really there. We waited in tense silence for nearly 10 minutes before the man vanished. Not walked away, just gone, like someone erased him with an invisible brush. Mark exhaled shakily. This is insane. You're telling me this happens every night? Not every night, I said. Only when something's hungry. Mark worked fast, avoiding my eyes. The air felt thicker somehow, like the store itself was breathing. I checked the clock again, 12:16 a.m., and remembered Rule 4. Come on, I said. Time for rounds. Rounds? We checked the perimeter, just the inside. Mark followed reluctantly as we moved through each aisle. Everything seemed normal until we reached the snacks section. There, a bag of chips sat open on the floor. I didn't do that, Mark said quickly. I know. Pick it up and throw it out, but don't look behind the freezer. He frowned. Why not? Rule 4. Never look behind the freezer after midnight. He hesitated, curiosity getting the better of him. Mark, I warned, don't. But he already had. He leaned slightly to the side, eyes darting toward the narrow gap, his face drained of color. What did you see? I asked quietly. Someone, he whispered. Someone standing back there. I shook my head. No one's been back there in years. Suddenly, the motion sensor light near the back flicked on. A shadow stretched along the floor, too tall, too thin to belong to either of us. Mark stumbled backward, clutching my arm. Sam, what is that thing? Rule 4 exists for a reason, I said, pulling him toward the counter. Whatever's behind the freezer doesn't like being seen. The shadow began to move, sliding across the linoleum like spilled ink. I reached under the counter for the emergency lantern, but the power cut out completely. In the darkness, I heard Mark whisper my name. Then a voice that wasn't his whispered it back. The lights didn't come back for nearly a minute, though it felt like hours. When they finally flickered on again, Mark was standing beside me, pale and shaking. His eyes darted toward the freezer aisle, but the space behind it was empty. No shadow, no sound, just stillness. I clicked on the emergency lantern anyway, setting it beside the register. The glow was weak but steady, painting the store in soft amber. You okay? I asked. He nodded, though his breathing said otherwise. That voice! It said your name. I know, I said quietly. It always does. Outside, the wind picked up, tossing stray receipts across the empty parking lot. Mark broke the silence first. You've been through this before, haven't you? Too many times, I said. The first month nearly broke me, but once you learn the rules, you learn how to survive. What happens if someone breaks them? I hesitated, my eyes drawn to the employee photo wall behind the counter. 12 faces stared back, former workers, all smiling, all gone. They stopped being part of the schedule, I said. You mean they quit? No. I mean, the store removes them. The clock struck 1 a.m., its sharp chime echoing through the aisles. Rule 6, I said softly. If you hear the chime more than once, cover your ears. It's not the clock anymore. Mark frowned. You're serious? I looked him dead in the eye. Deadly serious. The minutes passed uneventfully. For a while, I almost believed the night might calm down. We stocked shelves, refilled coffee, and even shared a few nervous laughs. Then, at 1037 a.m., the lantern dimmed, just slightly, like a breath being drawn in. Power surge? Mark asked. Maybe, I said, though I knew better. Don't move. The air grew cold enough to fog the glass doors. A faint tapping came from the far end of the store, rhythmic, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Someone's outside, Mark whispered. I grabbed his wrist. Don't look. He froze. Why? Because Rule 7 says if you hear tapping, it's already inside. His eyes widened. The tapping came again, closer this time, metal on tile. I turned the lantern slowly toward the sound. Between aisles 4 and 5 stood something tall and thin, its limbs too long, its skin stretched tight over its bones like wax. Its face was featureless except for a slit where a mouth should be. Mark gasped. The thing tilted its head, mirroring him like a grotesque reflection. What is that? He choked out. Don't speak to it, I said. Don't even breathe too loud. We backed toward the counter as the creature stepped forward. Its movements were jerky, puppet-like. When the lantern light hit its body, it froze mid-step, trembling as if in pain. Light, I whispered. It hates light. Mark snatched a lighter from the counter, flicking it to life. The small flame cast dancing shadows, and the creature hissed, a low, crackling sound that made my stomach twist. Then it retreated, vanishing into the back of the store. Mark exhaled shakily. What the hell is this place? Not a place, I said. A boundary. Between here and whatever's waiting on the other side. He stared at me, horror dawning on his face. You're saying this store is... Wrong, I interrupted. Built on something it shouldn't have been. The wind outside howled again, rattling the glass. Somewhere in the distance, the town clock chimed twice. Instinct took over. I slammed my hands over my ears. Mark, confused, didn't move fast enough. He stiffened, his eyes glazing over as if hearing something only he could understand. The lantern flickered violently. "Mark!" I shouted, shaking him. He blinked, dazed. "She's calling me," he whispered, "from behind the freezer." I gripped his shoulders hard. "Don't listen. That's how it starts." When it faded, Mark's expression cleared, but the damage was done. He looked different, emptier somehow. "We'll finish the shift," I said, voice low. "But you need to understand something, Mark. The store remembers who listens." He looked down at his trembling hands. "What does it remember?" "Everything," I said, "and it never forgives." By 2 a.m., the store had settled into its usual eerie rhythm, buzzing lights, humming coolers, the faint scent of burnt coffee clinging to the air. Mark hadn't spoken since the chime. He just kept staring at his reflection in the glass door, touching his face like he wasn't sure it was still his. I'd busied myself behind the counter, counting bills just to keep my hands moving. The silence between us grew heavy. Finally, I said, "You're handling this better than most." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Better? I can't even tell what's real anymore." "That's the trick," I said. "Doesn't matter what's real. Only what keeps you breathing till sunrise." The store clock ticked louder than usual. I tried not to look at the photo wall again, but curiosity won. 12 smiling faces, all lined up in neat rows. Jason, Carla, Vince, Leah, all gone. Their names had faded slightly, but the dates beneath them were burned into my memory. Every one of them had disappeared on a night just like this. Mark followed my gaze. "You said the store removes them. What does that mean?" "Exactly what it sounds like," I said. "Their names vanish from the system, their pay records disappear, and when corporate calls to check, they claim those people never existed. That's impossible." "Try filing a missing persons report," I said bitterly. "You'll see how fast the police forget." A gust of wind hit the doors, hard enough to rattle the glass. Both of us jumped. "Storm coming?" Mark asked. "There's never a storm," I said. "Not here." The power flickered again, and one of the overhead bulbs popped with a sharp crack. Sparks fell like fireflies. For a moment, everything was bathed in orange glow. When the light steadied, something was different about the photo wall. One more picture had appeared, a 13th frame empty except for the faint outline of a silhouette. Mark stepped closer. "That wasn't there before." "No," I whispered, throat tight. "It wasn't." His reflection shimmered faintly on the glass, aligning perfectly with the empty frame. "Why does it look like me?" he asked. "Because it is you," I said. He spun toward me, panicked. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking, Mark. The wall shows who the store's chosen next." He backed away from it, eyes darting wildly. "Chosen for what?" "Replacement," I said. "Every time someone breaks a rule, something new takes their place." The wind howled again, but this time it wasn't from outside. "What?" It came from the vents, carrying a low whisper that slithered through the aisles. I couldn't make out the words, but Mark heard them clearly. His face went white. "She's calling me again," he muttered. "She says she's cold." I grabbed the radio. "Stop listening! That voice isn't hers!" He didn't respond. The whispering grew louder, circling us. The lantern's flame danced wildly, throwing jagged shadows across the walls. Then the radio hissed to life. A woman's voice came through, soft and distorted. "Sam, it's me, Carla. I froze." Carla had been the last person to disappear. My throat tightened. "You're not Carla." The voice laughed quietly. "Still pretending the rules keep you safe?" Mark covered his ears, shaking his head. "Make it stop." The pictures on the wall began to blur, faces melting into smudges of color. The 13th frame filled completely now, with Mark's smiling face, eyes dark and hollow. "Sam," he whispered, "I don't want to die here." "Then do exactly as I say." I turned the lantern up to full brightness, flooding the store with golden light. The whispering retreated instantly, hissing in pain. Mark fell to his knees, gasping. The photo wall stilled. The 13th frame was blank again. I knelt beside him. "You're still here! That's what matters!" He looked up, terrified. "But for how long?" I didn't answer. The truth was, the store had already made its choice. The next night felt wrong before it even began. The air was heavier, thick with something metallic that clung to the back of my throat. I'd left Emma and Jacob with my mother again, promising I'd call after the shift. I didn't tell her that the store's rules were the only thing keeping me alive. She wouldn't believe me anyway. When I arrived, Mark was already there, leaning against his car, staring at the store like it was something alive. His face was pale, eyes rimmed red. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. He shook his head. "I kept hearing scratching in my apartment walls. Thought maybe I was imagining it. I wanted to say he probably was, but the truth was the scratching could follow you home if you weren't careful. Instead, I said, 'Then you'll be fine tonight.' You're not alone." Inside, the hum of the coolers seemed louder than usual. Every aisle buzzed faintly like a faraway insect nest. Mark grabbed a rag and started wiping the counter. He hadn't made a joke all evening. I didn't like that kind of silence. It meant the store had noticed him. At 12,007, the overhead lights flickered once, then steadied. I checked the clock and frowned. "Too early. What's that supposed to mean?" Mark asked. The flicker doesn't happen until 2000 on most nights, I said. Something's off. We moved together through the aisles, pretending to restock. It was safer to keep busy. Then came the knock. 3 slow raps from the direction of the storage room. Mark looked at me sharply. You expecting someone? No, I whispered. No one knocks after midnight. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a dragging sound, like something pulling itself across the floor. Mark started forward and I grabbed his sleeve. Rule 6, I said quickly. If you hear knocking from the storage room, you wait until 3,000 before opening it. That's ridiculous, he hissed. It could be William. William doesn't knock, I said flatly. We stood there in the aisle, frozen. The knocking stopped. Then, from the intercom, a faint static crackled to life, followed by my own voice. Sam, you can open it now. It's safe. Mark turned to me confused. That was you. No, I whispered. It wasn't. The lights flickered again, longer this time. I could see the shape of something pressing against the storage door from the inside, human size, but its outline was all wrong. Its head brushed the frame and its arms were too long. The metal hinges groaned. Mark took a shaky step forward. Sam, it's saying your name! I shook my head. That's not me it's calling for. Then softly the voice came again, warped but unmistakably mine. Mark, please help me! He froze. I could see the war in his eyes, his disbelief fighting the instinct to save someone. I grabbed his wrist. If you open that door, it won't be me you find. The store went silent. Even the humming of the coolers died away. I could hear Mark's breathing, fast and shallow. Finally, the noise behind the door stopped too. For a few seconds, it was completely quiet. Then something slid under the door, a Polaroid photo, fresh and glossy. Mark bent to pick it up. I snatched it from his hand before he could look too closely. It showed the two of us standing exactly where we were now, staring at the storage door. But there was a third figure between us, tall and pale, its hand on Mark's shoulder. He saw enough to stumble backward. What is that? I tore the photo in half and threw it into the trash. That's the store reminding us who's really in charge. When the hum of the coolers resumed, I knew the danger had passed. For now, Mark leaned against the counter, trembling. I want to quit, he whispered. I looked at him and said the truth no one wanted to hear. You can't quit. Not anymore. Outside, the sign flickered once, glowing red instead of white. The stop and go had claimed him. The following night, a storm finally came, but it wasn't natural. The clouds above the stop and go didn't roll or drift. They hung perfectly still, pulsing faintly like veins under black skin. Rain hissed against the glass, too heavy and too rhythmic to be real. I'd stopped expecting normal weather years ago. Mark showed up right on time, his eyes hollow from lack of sleep. He didn't even bother greeting me this time, just clocked in and started brewing coffee. You ever think this job's a test? He asked suddenly. A test for what? To see how much fear a person can take before breaking. I looked at him, really looked at him. If that's true, I said, most people fail. The clock ticked toward midnight. Rule 11. Always have the radio tuned to station 1004.6 at 1200 sharp. The static isn't random, it's a warning. I'd taught him that rule on his first night, but tonight he'd have to experience it himself. At 11:588, I turned the old radio's dial until the familiar buzz filled the store. The sound felt wrong in my ears, thick and electric, almost breathing. Mark leaned close. Why did we do this again? Because when the static stops, something else starts, I said. Right on cue, the static faded into silence. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a man's voice came through, low and calm like a midnight DJ. Good evening, listeners. It's another quiet night in Riverdale. If you're driving, keep your eyes on the road. If you're working late, don't look behind you. Mark froze. What did he just say? I swallowed. Don't look behind you. The voice continued, naming streets that didn't exist and describing weather patterns that looped in impossible circles. Then came the names, spoken softly one by one. Jason Myers, Leah Collins, Carla Finch, Mark Carter. Mark jerked like he'd been struck. That's my name. I nodded slowly. It reads out the next one. He backed away from the counter, face pale. Turn it off. I can't, I said. If we interrupt the broadcast, the signal finds us another way. The lights dimmed, flickering in rhythm with the radio's low hum. The man's voice turned distorted, cracking and stretching like something was pushing through it. And a warm welcome to our new listener, Samantha. The temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged in front of me. I grabbed the emergency lantern and switched it on, casting a pool of gold light across the counter. The radio let out a long, drawn-out hiss, then silence. Is it over? Mark whispered. Not yet, I said. Wait for the echo. A faint sound drifted through the aisles. The same words the DJ had said, repeated softly in our own voices. Don't look behind you. Mark turned despite my warning. I reached for him, but too late. His eyes went wide. Sam, he breathed. There's someone standing in the freezer aisle. I forced myself not to look. Keep your eyes down. Focus on me. It looks like you, he whispered. I said, don't look. The shadow stepped closer. its reflection visible in the chrome coffee pot. It was me, but wrong. My eyes were solid black, my face slack. It mouthed words I couldn't hear, then turned its head slowly toward Mark. The lantern's light flickered. I grabbed the salt jar we kept beneath the counter, old habit from William's training, and threw a line of it across the floor between us and the reflection. The shadow stopped, twitching violently, then shattered into mist. The radio clicked back on, the DJ's voice calm again. "Broadcast concluded. Thank you for listening." Mark was shaking. "What the hell was that?" I exhaled. "That," I said quietly, "is why I told you not to look." Outside, the storm vanished as if it had never existed. Only the reflection of the stop-and-go sign remained, red letters glowing in the dark, pulsing like a heartbeat. By the fourth night of his training, Mark barely resembled the confident man who'd walked into my store a week ago. His shirt was wrinkled, his hands shook when he handled the register, and his eyes darted to every reflection that glimmered in the glass. I didn't blame him. The rules weren't just words anymore. They'd started breathing down his neck. It was just after 1:00 a.m. when the doorbell chime began. The air pressure changed instantly. I felt it in my bones before I even looked up. A woman stepped in, wearing a bright red coat that shimmered wetly, though there hadn't been any rain. Her hair was perfect, her smile polite, but something in her eyes wasn't human. "Evening," she said, her voice like music through static. "Could I get a coffee? 2 sugars." Mark moved automatically toward the machine. I shot him a sharp look. "Rule 8, I hissed. He froze, eyes wide. "Which one's that again?" "Don't serve anyone wearing red after 1:00 a.m. The woman tilted her head, her smile widening just a little too far. "Oh, come on, Sam," she said softly. "That's not very friendly." Mark's face drained of color. "She knows your name." "She shouldn't," I said. The woman's heels clicked across the tile as she approached the counter. The closer she got, the colder the air became. Her coat glistened in the fluorescent light, no longer looking like fabric, but something slicker, thicker. Blood. My chest tightened. "Would you really deny a tired traveler her drink?" she asked. "You used to be more welcoming." "Don't talk to it," I whispered to Mark. "Don't answer." But he was frozen, his hands trembling. "She looks normal," he whispered. "She's not," I said. "She's remembering." The woman placed both hands on the counter. Her fingernails were too long, curling slightly at the ends. "You trained the last one too, didn't you? Jason?" she murmured. "He was polite. He offered me coffee. Jason broke the rules," I said. Her smile sharpened. "And he's still paying for it." Mark flinched backward as she leaned closer. "You smell like him," she said to him, "so full of fear, so ready to believe." I grabbed the salt jar again, pouring a thin white line across the counter between us. The woman's smile vanished instantly. Her voice dropped to a growl. "That won't save you forever." The lights flickered violently, every bulb buzzing with heat. For a moment, her reflection vanished from the glass, then reappeared closer, standing behind Mark. "Don't move," I said. "Not a muscle." Mark's breathing hitched. "She's whispering my name. Keep your eyes on me." The woman in red let out a long, low sigh that made the shelves rattle. Then she turned, gliding toward the exit. As she passed the automatic doors, they opened too slowly, as though resisting her. She looked back once, eyes glowing faintly beneath the lights. "See you soon, Sam." Then she was gone. The doors closed. The room fell silent except for the hum of the coolers and Mark's ragged breathing. He wiped his face with a trembling hand. What was that? "Another reason for the rules," I said softly. "You follow them, you survive. You don't, you become part of her story." He sank onto a stool, staring blankly at the counter. "Why didn't she take me?" I met his eyes. "Because she already has her next one." He swallowed hard. "Who?" I looked toward the dark reflection in the window where a faint silhouette now stood beside us, unmoving. "You'll know soon enough," I said. Outside, the red glow of the stop-and-go sign flickered 3 times, then stayed dark. Inside, the temperature dropped again. The store was awake and waiting. The next evening, Mark showed up an hour early, pale and sleepless. He didn't even bother with greetings, just went straight to checking the door locks and unplugging the coffee machine. He'd learned fast. That was good. Fear was the best teacher on these shifts. "Is she coming back?" he asked quietly. "Maybe," I said, stocking the shelves, "but she's not the only one we need to worry about." He looked up, confusion etched on his face. I gestured toward the security monitor. On the screen, the parking lot looked empty, but the timestamp flickered between 2130 and 3004. "That's a time gap," I said. "Means something crossed the lot while the cameras blinked." Mark swallowed hard. "And we didn't see it?" "Exactly." For the next hour, the store felt heavy, like the air itself didn't want us there. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder than usual. The humming from the refrigerators turned into a kind of low growl. I could feel the building's pulse syncing with mine. At 12:47 a.m., I pulled out a small black notebook from under the counter. Mark noticed and frowned. "What's that?" "The pact," I said. "Every worker who's made it through a full month signs this." He stared at the pages, rows of signatures, some smudged, some written in shaky ink. "Most didn't last long enough to sign," I said quietly. "The ones who did, they left something behind." Mark took the pen but hesitated. What happens if I sign? It means you understand. You've accepted that this place isn't normal, and that once you're part of it, you can't just quit. He frowned. You mean like cursed? I gave a humorless smile. Something like that. He scribbled his name slowly. The moment his pen left the paper, the overhead lights dimmed for a split second, long enough for the aisles to vanish into blackness and reappear. Mark jumped back. Did you see that? I nodded. The store accepted you. At 1005 a.m., the bell above the door jingled. Mark stiffened. Relax, I said. Not everything that comes in is bad. A man in a janitor's uniform walked in, pushing an empty mop bucket. He didn't make eye contact, just moved to the back where the restroom hallway was. Mark frowned. Do we have a janitor? No, I said. We both turned toward the hallway. The sound of dripping echoed faintly, followed by a dragging noise, then silence. Mark's hand found the salt jar again. Do we? Not yet, I said. Wait. Wait. The man reappeared 5 minutes later, walking backward out of the hall, his face still pointed toward the darkness. When he reached the counter, his eyes finally lifted, empty socket staring right at us. Mark screamed. I slammed the notebook shut, and the man vanished instantly. The lights brightened again. The only sign of him left was a trail of wet footprints leading to the door. Mark was trembling. What the hell was that? A memory, I said. Someone who didn't make it through their pact. He stared at the notebook. So that thing keeps them here. It keeps us safe from worse, I said. The store remembers its employees. The moment we forget the rules, it reminds us what happens. Outside, wind howled through the parking lot, carrying faint whispers that made the glass vibrate. Mark looked exhausted, like he'd aged years in one night. Why do you still do this, Sam? He asked. I glanced at the reflection in the cooler door, two figures standing behind us that weren't there in real life. Because someone has to, I said. And now, so do you. He swallowed. How long until the month's up? Rain came down in thick, slanted sheets that turned the world beyond the parking lot into a gray smear. Mark sat at the counter, tapping a pen nervously. It's quieter than usual, he said. Too quiet, I murmured. The cameras flickered, their feeds turning static for half a second at a time. Every time they blinked back, something in the aisles looked slightly different. A bottle turned, a door ajar, a shadow standing closer to the window. Don't look out there, I warned him. He frowned. Why? Because he's watching tonight. Mark froze. Who? I pointed toward the glass storefront. Rule 3. Remember? He recited it mechanically. If you see someone standing outside the window who looks like you, don't let them in. The lights dimmed. For a moment, the world outside vanished completely. Then lightning flashed, illuminating a tall figure standing in the parking lot. Mark gasped. He looks like you, I finished. The double was drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead. His expression was blank, but his eyes burned faintly with something alive, something aware. He raised his hand and mimicked Mark's trembling gesture exactly. Don't move, I whispered. Don't even breathe. The figure outside pressed one palm to the glass. Water streaked down his reflection. Slowly, deliberately, he smiled, a perfect mirror of Mark's own terrified face. Then he mouthed something. Mark squinted. He sang, "Help me." Lightning flashed again. The reflection was gone. Mark stumbled back. What? Where did he go? I didn't answer. I already knew. I turned to the camera feeds. On the top left screen, aisle 4 now showed 2 Marks, one crouched behind the shelf, breathing heavily, the other walking calmly toward the counter. Stay behind me, I said. Mark's voice shook. How? How is that even possible? It's not him. It's what the storm brings. The double stepped into view, eyes glowing faintly white in the fluorescent light. His movements were too smooth, too deliberate. He tilted his head, studying me. Hello, Sam, it said in Mark's exact voice. You've kept this place tidy. Mark whimpered behind me. That's not me, I know, I said. I grabbed the salt jar, but before I could open it, the lights blew out, one by one, popping in rapid succession until darkness swallowed the room. Only the red open sign flickered weakly through the glass. The double's voice echoed softly from the aisles. He signed the pact, didn't he? That means he belongs here now. I struck a match. The tiny flame revealed Mark's terrified face beside me, and the shadow of his duplicate standing directly behind him. Move! I shouted, throwing the salt in an arc. The flame extinguished, and the sound that followed was like wind tearing through metal. When the emergency lights flickered on, the aisle was empty. Mark lay shaking on the floor, his shirt damp with sweat. He touched me, he whispered. I felt it cold, like my soul froze. I knelt beside him. If he touched you, we don't have much time. He looked at me, terrified. What do you mean? The doubles don't just copy, they replace. He clutched my arm. You have to help me, Sam. I stared into his eyes. For a moment, I saw the faintest flicker of white behind his pupils. The storm outside stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The air turned still. Mark stood up slowly, too calmly. "Thanks," he said. His voice was smooth now. "Controlled. I feel much better." He smiled, and the reflection in the window smiled a split second too late. I realized then that the real Mark was gone. The morning after the storm, I arrived early. The parking lot was covered in broken branches and soaked paper cups, the neon sign still flickering dimly in the dawn light. Inside, the aisles looked untouched, but the silence felt wrong, too still, like the store was holding its breath. Mark wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe he'd gone home after the shift, but his car was still parked out front, driver's door cracked open. His keys lay on the seat, the ignition cold. My stomach dropped. I checked the cameras. Every feed was blank from 3017 a.m. onward. No static, no movement, just black screens. I rewound the footage, and there he was, Mark standing at the counter, talking to someone just outside frame. Then, without warning, he turned, walked toward aisle 4, and vanished. No distortion, no flash, just gone. I sat there staring at the monitor, heart pounding. The store had taken him. When the clock hit 8:30 a.m., the day manager, Greta, arrived, humming some old pop song. She looked the same as always, bright smile, clipboard in hand, but when she saw my face, the tune died on her lips. "Rough night?" she asked. "Mark's gone," I said. "He didn't leave. Check the lot." She blinked, confused. "Mark who?" "The trainee," I snapped. "You hired him last week." She frowned. "Sam, we haven't hired anyone in months." I stared at her, unable to speak. "You don't remember him?" She shook her head. "You've been on solo shifts for weeks." I wanted to argue, but the words stuck in my throat. I checked the employee records in the back office. His name wasn't there. The signature in the pact book was gone too, the page smoothed clean like it had never been touched. My hands trembled. The store didn't just take him, it erased him. I left early that day, ignoring Greta's questions. At home, I sat on my couch with a mug of cold coffee, staring at the wall. Every sound, the creak of the pipes, the hum of the fridge, felt like the store breathing through my house. That night, I dreamed of aisle 4. Mark stood there, half lit by the emergency lights, calling my name. "You left me," he said. His voice was distorted, underwater. "It's not done with you yet." I tried to reach him, but the floor stretched away, miles long, until he disappeared into the dark. When I woke, the clock read 11:47 p.m., 15 minutes before my shift. My phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "Come back! The rules are changing!" Against every instinct I had, I drove back. The highway was deserted, the asphalt gleaming under a thin layer of fog. When the store came into view, all its lights were already on, glowing far too bright for midnight. Inside, everything was perfectly arranged. The shelves were restocked, the coffee fresh, and on the counter sat the black notebook, the pact book, open to a blank page. A pen lay beside it. Then I saw the reflection in the cooler glass. Mark stood there, pale and still, smiling faintly. "You shouldn't have left," he whispered. My voice trembled. "What do you want?" His reflection leaned closer. "Finish what we started." The pen rolled across the counter on its own and stopped at my hand. My fingers twitched. The page looked blank, but faint letters began bleeding through one by one. "New rule," it read. "Don't forget the ones the store remembers for you. .s." I looked up again. Mark was gone, but in the reflection there were two of me. The next night, I told myself I wouldn't go back. I sat at my kitchen table long after Emma and Jacob were asleep, staring at my car keys. The sensible thing was to quit, to call Thomas, tell him I was done. But that message, "Come back, the rules are changing," wouldn't leave my mind. The store had a way of pulling people back. Maybe it wasn't finished with me yet. Maybe it never would be. By 9:00 p.m., I was driving again, headlights cutting through the fog. The stop and go appeared out of the dark like it always did, lonely and humming with its own kind of life. Ashley's car was already there. I felt a strange relief knowing she had come back too. Inside, the store looked perfectly normal. Ashley was wiping down the counter, her hair pulled back, her expression tired but calm. "Hey," she said, forcing a smile. "Thought maybe you wouldn't show." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "How are you holding up?" She shrugged. "Still jumpy. But Thomas said last night was just the beginning, whatever that means." Before I could ask, the intercom crackled. A low voice came through. "Thomas, both of you, to the back office." His tone left no room for questions. We went, exchanging uneasy glances. Inside the office, Thomas was already there, sitting behind the old desk. The single lamp cast deep shadows over his face. Beside him stood William, silent as always, his hood pulled up. Thomas slid a new folder across the desk. "You've both seen what happens when the rules are broken," he said. "Now you'll learn what happens when they change." "Change? You mean they're not permanent?" "They evolve," Thomas replied. "The other side adapts. Every time we hold the line, they find another way to test it. Tonight you'll memorize 5 new protocols." He opened the folder. Inside were handwritten pages, symbols, and new rules scrawled in red ink. Rule 13. Never face the glass doors after midnight. Rule 14. If the power goes out twice, the third time isn't an outage. Rule 15, when you hear your own voice calling from the aisles, lock yourself in the office until dawn. Act Rule 16, if the sun rises before 6:30 a.m., it's not the sun. I felt the chill crawl up my spine as I read. Why these? I asked. Because the barrier is thinning again. The storm weakened it more than we realized. William stepped forward, placing something on the desk. 2 silver amulets engraved with spirals and unfamiliar runes. Wear them, he said quietly. They'll blur your presence from what watches. Ashley slipped hers on immediately. I hesitated, the metal strangely warm in my hand. Does this mean we're targets now? I asked. Thomas's expression didn't change. You always were! The intercom crackled again, static, then a soft, echoing laugh. Not human. Every light in the office flickered once. William's hand shot up, signaling silence. Already starting, he murmured. Thomas stood. You know the rules. Stay sharp. I'll monitor from here. Ashley and I stepped back into the store. The air felt heavier, charged. Every hum from the lights, every flicker of motion in the glass made my heart race. As midnight approached, the reflections in the freezer doors began to move half a second slower than we did. Ashley noticed first, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. Sam, she whispered. Rule 12. We froze. Our reflections turned toward us, smiling. Neither of us spoke. Then, behind the glass, my reflection lifted its hand and pointed toward aisle 4. Something waited there, something that wasn't reflected anywhere at all. Ashley grabbed my arm as our reflections froze in place, still smiling in that unnatural, delayed way. For a few seconds, the store's hum vanished entirely, replaced by a low, distant sound that could have been wind or whispering. I felt the amulet around my neck grow hot, pulsing faintly against my skin. Don't look, I whispered, eyes fixed on the floor tiles. Rule 12, silence! Ashley nodded, trembling, but something in her breathing shifted, a quiet, startled gasp. I risked a glance and saw one of the reflections tilt its head like a curious animal. Its mouth opened wider and wider until the grin split its face clean to the ears. Sam! Ashley mouthed the word rather than spoke it. The lights above us flickered 3 times. My instinct screamed. Back room! Now! I hissed. We bolted past the registers, hearing the squeal of metal as the glass doors rattled behind us. Whatever was in those reflections didn't like being ignored. Inside the back room, I slammed the bolt and leaned against the door, heart hammering. The air smelled of cold metal and something sweet like rot hidden beneath bleach. Ashley clutched her amulet, trying to steady her breath. Was that supposed to happen? She asked shakily. No, I said, but it's only 12,005. The rules change for a reason. We waited in silence. 7 minutes passed, the usual protocol for light flickers, but the store remained eerily quiet. Then, from somewhere near the aisles, a sound echoed. It was my voice. Sam? Can you come out here? Rule 15, she whispered. I nodded, but hearing my own tone, soft, calm, perfectly familiar, made my stomach twist. It sounded exactly like me, right down to the tired rasp I'd developed from years of night shifts. Sam, the voice called again, closer this time. Thomas said to open the door. I covered my mouth with my hand. Ashley mouthed. It knows your name. Don't move, I mouthed back. Then came 3 deliberate knocks. Not frantic, not random. 3 slow, patient knocks that matched the rhythm of a heartbeat. Ashley flinched. The handle twitched once, twice, then stopped. The silence after was unbearable. I counted in my head. 30 seconds, 60, 90. Finally, I risked whispering, We need to tell Thomas. I grabbed the intercom mic on the wall. Static greeted me, thick and heavy. Then a voice, not Thomas's, slid through the noise. You shouldn't have looked, it said. Male, calm, but wrong. Now it knows which one to keep. I dropped the mic like it burned me. Ashley backed up until she hit the far wall. Sam, what does that mean? Before I could answer, the lights flickered twice. My chest tightened. If they go out again, I said, we run for the office. Ashley nodded, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. The third flicker came and didn't come back on. Darkness swallowed everything. I grabbed Ashley's wrist and pulled her toward the faint red glow of the emergency exit light. The shelves seemed to stretch farther than they should, aisles twisting into unfamiliar paths. Every step felt like moving through thick, invisible water. Somewhere behind us, footsteps began to echo. Not ours. Slower, deliberate, dragging slightly as though something heavy followed. Keep moving, I whispered. Don't stop. We turned a corner, nearly tripping over a fallen display rack. The glow ahead brightened. Thomas's office door opened a crack, light spilling through. I shoved Ashley inside and slammed it shut behind us. Thomas looked up from his monitors, face pale. What did you see? He demanded. I could barely form the words. It was me, I said, but it wasn't. On the screen behind him, the security footage played back in silent black and white. In the reflection of the freezer door, my double was still standing there. Thomas froze, eyes glued to the screen. The security feed showed Ashley and me running for the back room just as we had, but our reflections hadn't followed us. They'd stayed behind, watching, smiling. Then, one by one, they turned to face the camera and waved. Ashley covered her mouth. "That's impossible," she whispered. There, thinking. Thomas slammed a key on the console, cycling through camera angles. Each view showed the same thing. The store empty, except for those reflections, now moving independently. My mirrored self walked down aisle 4, paused, then looked straight into the camera lens. "That's not you," Thomas muttered. "It's testing the barrier again." "The barrier?" I repeated, feeling sick. "You mean between us and whatever that is?" He nodded grimly. "Every rule we followed keeps the threshold sealed. But the mirror walkers, those things learn with every mistake. That's why the rules shift. They adapt." Ashley backed away from the monitors. "You said if we follow the rules, we're safe." Thomas didn't answer. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a small glass vial filled with pale dust. "Salt mixed with silver shavings," he said. "Lay it along the door frames. They can't cross it if you keep the line unbroken." We moved quickly, spreading the mixture along the office threshold. My hand shook as I poured. "How long does it last?" "Until dawn," Thomas said. "If dawn comes." I looked at him sharply. "What do you mean, Sif?" Before he could answer, the intercom crackled again. A woman's voice filled the room, soft, trembling, familiar. "Mom?" My blood ran cold. "Emma," I breathed, stepping toward the speaker. The voice was so clear. My daughter's voice. "Sam!" You know it's not her. But the sound of her small voice saying, "Please, I'm outside," shattered my reason. I moved closer, hand hovering over the button. Thomas stood abruptly. "That's not your daughter," he barked. "It's the same mimic from the reflections. It wants you to open the door." The monitors filled with static before clearing to show the parking lot. My heart stopped. There she was, Emma, standing by my car in her pajamas, barefoot, shivering. "Mommy, it's cold," she said, looking up at the security camera. Tears filled my eyes. "She looks real," I whispered. Thomas's voice was sharp. "Because it wears real. It uses what it takes." Ashley pressed herself against the wall, trembling. "This can't be happening. On the monitor, Emma, or what looked like her," tilted her head, that same unnatural angle Karen Mitchells had taken days before. The thing smiled, too wide, too slow. "Sam," Thomas said, his voice low but steady. "Do not open that door." I nodded, forcing myself to step back. But as I did, something new appeared on the feed. My reflection again, standing behind the false Emma, one hand resting on her shoulder. They both turned toward the camera in perfect unison. The image flickered. Then every screen in the office filled with a message written in static text. "The rules are wrong now." The power went out completely. We were plunged into silence until footsteps started above us, crawling across the ceiling tiles. Ashley whimpered, "What do we do?" Thomas held up the vial, shaking the last of the silver dust. "Stay inside the circle, no matter what happens." The footsteps stopped. Then the ceiling bulged downward, and a pale hand pushed through, reaching for the light. I clutched the amulet around my neck and whispered, "Please, not tonight." The hand withdrew. The ceiling went still. And from the dark corner of the office, my own voice whispered back, "You shouldn't have looked." The lights flickered back on, dim and weak. Thomas was gone. One moment he'd been standing beside the desk. The next, the space was empty. No sound, no flash, no sign of struggle. Just gone. Ashley and I stared at the spot where he'd been, unable to move. "Did you see?" she started. I shook my head slowly. "No, he just vanished." The monitors hissed, then cleared. Every camera now showed the same thing, us, standing in the office, but slightly out of sync as if the footage lagged by a second. And then, behind our on-screen selves, the dark shapes began to gather again. "They're inside the feed," Ashley whispered. The amulet around my neck pulsed once, faintly. I didn't know if that meant it was working or failing. "We can't stay in here," I said. "If the rules change, the salt might not matter anymore." Ashley's eyes darted toward the door. "So what do we do, Sam? Run?" I thought of my kids, of Emma's false image on the camera, smiling like a doll. "We finished the shift," I said, surprising even myself. "We survive until dawn." We stepped back into the store. The aisles looked warped now, longer than they should be. The overhead lights hummed like something breathing. The air shimmered faintly, as if the store existed underwater. Ashley held the flashlight steady, sweeping it across shelves. "Everything feels wrong," she whispered. "It always does before it resets," I said. "Thomas told me once the store fixes itself at sunrise. Then we just have to make it until then." The words barely left her mouth before the radio at the counter crackled to life. Static hissed. Then a man's voice broke through. "Sam, it's Mark!" I froze. "Mark?" His voice was calm, steady, unmistakable. "You were right. About everything. But it's not what you think." Ashley turned to me, shaking her head. He's dead. You said he? I know, I said quietly. Sam, the voice continued, there's something in aisle 3. It wants you to see it. I looked toward aisle 3. The light above it flickered just once. Don't even think about it. But something pulled me forward, a weightless tug, not quite compulsion, not quite choice. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly ahead. My own voice whispered from somewhere deep in the store, Come see! I took one step, then another. Ashley followed close, whispering prayers under her breath. When we reached the end of the aisle, I saw him, Mark, standing in front of the cooler, looking exactly as he had the night he disappeared. His uniform was spotless, his smile gentle. Sam, he said softly, I get it now. The rules aren't protection, they're invitations. I stared at him, horrified. That's not you. He tilted his head. Aren't you tired of surviving? It's easier once you stop fighting. I stepped back. You're not Mark. His smile widened, stretching unnaturally. Not anymore. The lights blinked twice. I grabbed Ashley's hand. Run! We sprinted for the exit, but the glass doors reflected our movement, 2 shadows running parallel to us, faster, closing in. When we reached the door, our reflections slammed into it from the other side, trapping us. Ashley screamed, slamming her fist against the glass. The reflections grinned, mimicking the motion with perfect delayed precision. Look away! I shouted, yanking her aside. The emergency alarm blared, and suddenly the reflection of dawn broke across the glass orange light flooding the aisles. But outside, the sky was still black. Ashley's voice trembled. Rule 16. If the sun rises before 6, I finished the sentence for her. It's not the sun. We backed away as the false light poured through the windows, and something vast and shapeless began crawling toward us from behind it. The false sunlight glared through the windows, sharp and metallic. It shimmered like liquid glass, spilling across the floor in uneven waves. Ashley covered her eyes, stumbling backward, but I couldn't look away. The light wasn't warm, it was cold, humming like electricity, crawling toward us with deliberate hunger. Sam, Ashley gasped. We have to hide now. I grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the back hallway, past the flickering refrigerators in the shadow of aisle 3 where Mark's reflection still smiled, frozen in the glass. The light chased us, bending unnaturally, slithering along the floor like a living tide. We burst into the stockroom. The air inside was thick, heavy with the smell of oil and static. The old clock on the wall read 5:05:07 a.m. 3 more minutes until sunrise, or whatever counted as sunrise now. Ashley fell against the wall, panting. If that thing reaches us... It won't, I said, though I wasn't sure. The amulet against my chest pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat struggling to continue. The radios crackled again. This time, dozens of voices spoke at once. Mark's, Thomas's, mine, even Ashley's, all layered, overlapping. Finish the shift, they whispered in perfect rhythm. Finish the shift. The words grew louder, pounding in my skull. Ashley covered her ears, screaming, Make it stop! I ripped the radio cord from the wall, but the voices didn't stop. They came from everywhere. The vents, the shelves, even the cracks in the concrete floor. The light outside the door grew brighter, turning the shadows gold. The amulet flared once, then cracked down the middle. A faint, burning symbol appeared on the wall, something like an eye surrounded by spirals. It pulsed with the same rhythm as my heartbeat. What is that? I think it's the real rule, I said slowly, the one they never wrote down. The symbol brightened, and the whispers shifted into a single clear voice. My voice. You broke the pattern, Sam, it said. Now it breaks you. The floor vibrated, the walls bent inward, as if the store itself was breathing. Cans rolled from shelves. The humming light outside turned violent, flaring white. Ashley grabbed my arm. If the rules are invitations, maybe we can refuse them. How? I shouted over the noise. She looked at the clock, 5599s. We stay. We don't open the door. We don't step into their sunrise. For once, it made sense. Every rule had been about obedience, follow, comply, repeat. Maybe defiance was the only thing left. We pressed our backs against the far wall as the fake dawn reached the stockroom door. It paused there, almost curious, then seeped under the crack. The light touched my boot, freezing it instantly in place. My leg turned numb. Ashley screamed, grabbing my arm, trying to pull me free. I felt the cold crawling higher, up my knee, my thigh. Go! I shouted. Run! She shook her head violently. Not without you! The amulet crumbled to dust, and the symbol on the wall exploded in a burst of light. The pressure vanished. The door blew open, and a real wind swept in, cool, earthy, filled with the sound of birds. Ashley blinked in disbelief. Outside, the horizon glowed with the first true rays of dawn. It's over, she whispered. I looked down. My foot was blackened, half gone, but I was still here. We stepped outside. The parking lot was empty, the road beyond silent. The neon sign above the station flickered weakly before finally dying. Ashley turned to me. You think it'll ever come back? I looked toward the rising sun, uncertain. If it does, I said quietly, someone else will have to work the morning shift. Behind us, the store door creaked open on its own, and somewhere deep inside, a radio whispered one last time, "Shift complete."